Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Common Threads podcast. I'm your host, Kate Hall, and today we have a very special guest, my good friend, Naomi Lin-Anderson. Naomi is a half Taiwanese, half white Utahn who loves to dance, read, and paint. She's also a churchgoer and an elementary school teacher. Thank you so much, Naomi, for being here. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you, Kate, for inviting me. I'm
This is going to
excited
be so
too.
fun.
hmm
So I kind of just gave a little intro about you, but obviously there's so much more to you. Do you want to reintroduce yourself and maybe hit some points that I didn't mention?
Sure. So again, Naomi Lin-Anderson. Have grown up in Utah my whole life. So I lived some in Taylorsville, some in St. George, now in kind of Utah Valley area. Like you said, my dad is from Taiwan, my mom is from California, so kind of have like two cultures in my own family. I graduated from Brigham Young University last year and am a teacher right now. And then I guess a little disclosure to say is that all the views that I express in this interview are my own personal beliefs, my own experiences. They in no way represent my school, my district, my employer. And I keep my own beliefs out of my teaching in the classroom.
No, that's perfect. I love that. So you mentioned you had kind of two cultures going on in your family, which I think is really cool. Did you get to experience both of those cultures growing up, kind of balanced and equally, or what was that like growing up with kind of these two different identities, I guess?
Yeah, that is a great question. We call in my family, like me and my siblings call ourselves bananas because like outwardly, like I look pretty Asian, like people can tell I'm not like full white, obviously, but it's kind of interesting because I grew up in a home where my mom was at home with us most of the time and she's white and my dad who's Asian was, usually off working. So I feel like a lot of our like family culture mostly comes from my mom just by virtue of her being around more often. And so, none of my siblings, my dad grew up kind of speaking Mandarin and things, and none of us really speak Mandarin at all. Like my mom taught us how to count to 10 and like two basic phrases. Um, and anyways, but I feel like kind of as all of my siblings and I have grown up and like come to be adults, we've kind of realized that like, oh, we have this I don't know, like missing piece of us almost that it feels like we didn't quite get to have as children. And so I feel like we've all kind of come back in different ways to like I don't know, to like more of my dad's family and my dad's culture and trying to understand that a little bit better because um, I just feel like it helps us better understand ourselves as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Did your did your dad grow up in Taiwan or did he grow up in the States?
No, yeah, great question. So he was born in California when his parents were here for grad school, and then they went back to Taiwan, and he lived there for 7 years, and then lived in Singapore for 7 years before coming back to the United States for middle school and high school.
Okay, gotcha. Have you guys ever gone
hmm
back and like visited his family over there?
Yes, so I've been to Taiwan specifically. So I went once when I was two, don't remember that at all. Once in high school, my junior year, my whole family went because my great grandma, for my great grandma's birthday, basically. And I also also don't really remember a whole ton about that trip, but it was very foreign, kind of like my first time out of the country. So everything just seemed very different. And again, from like the culture that I'd grown up in. And then actually just last month, so I'm the oldest. I have two brothers and a sister. So my second brother was doing an internship in Taiwan teaching English at a school for a few months. And so at the end of his internship, my sister and I went back with him and like just went around for a week. And it was really awesome. None of my aunts and uncles live there anymore. Like my grandma lives in the States too, but she has some sisters who live in Taiwan still. So we went out with them for a few meals and stuff. And then we went and visited like this family ancestral home, just kind of showed up like my aunt had told us about it. My dad's never been there either, but we just kind of showed up at the door. We're like, hey, like we're family, and the people are like, we don't speak English. We're like, okay. Anyways, and just ended up meeting like my great grandpa's cousin, who's like this fairly well-known like guy in the area, and he owns this house, and got to see like pictures of some of our ancestors and like just hear these stories. Anyway, so I feel like just this last trip, like I'm 25 now, I'm like, okay, I have a better grasp of like who I am and like wanting to know my family better. So that trip was really special to have with my siblings.
Yeah, that sounds like a great trip. I know my brother's Korean, and I know for him, he got to go to Korea for the first time. He's always lived in the States, but he got to go
Yeah.
this last year to Korea for the first time, and it was such a formative experience for him just to like he's always felt connected to his Korean roots, but just going over there and
Mm-hmm.
experiencing it firsthand and being like engulfed in the language and the food and the culture and everything was just so like an amazing experience for him, as I'm sure it was for you as well. So that's really
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, for sure. It's very special.
That's awesome. So shifting to just a little bit of political beliefs, what you mentioned you grew up your first part of your childhood in northern Utah.
Hmm.
Did the political dynamics that were going on kind of in your community and your church, your neighborhood, did they were they similar to what you were being taught by your parents at home, or were they very different from what you kind of grew up being taught?
That's a great question. Generally, Utah is a pretty conservative state, as generally hearing conservative ideals at church, school, and honestly at home as well. My parents weren't super open about like their political beliefs and things, but like, I knew they voted Republican when like a Republican president, was nominated and things like that. So
Hmm.
generally, like, didn't know a ton, but I knew enough to know like, okay, my parents generally side more conservative at
Hmm.
the time.
Did you, yeah, yeah. Did you feel like you personally, and maybe you were too young, but did you feel like personally you agreed with a lot of what your parents were telling you, or did you kind of have this like, I don't know, clashing of ideas a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I was a pretty like ignorant follower, I would probably say, when I was young. Just, everything was seemed very black and white to me. And so I just kind of followed, when I remember like the Obama McCain election, like some of my friends were talking about it, and I was like, oh yeah, like I would totally vote for McCain. Like no idea what he actually stands for or like who he actually is, but like I would vote for him because that's what my parents voted. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, and it kind of continued through like high school and things. Like I'd kind of just like parrot like beliefs that I'd heard at church and things, which weren't necessarily wrong, but I didn't know that much about them. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. So then you moved to Southern Utah, right? How old were you when you moved down here?
Middle school, so eighth grade, going to eighth grade.
Okay, awesome. Was that
Hmm.
a huge change for you at that time of life?
Yes, it was very big. For a long time, I would say that was like kind of like the biggest trial of like my life until adulthood. I was pretty quiet, pretty shy, didn't make friends super easily, and I was used to like the same thing. And so having such a big change, even though it was in the same state, was a pretty big deal for me. So something I
Mhm.
struggled with for a little bit, but I'm glad we did in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good. You come around to it a little bit. Did
Hmm.
you notice any differences between what people believed up north versus what people believed in southern Utah?
Oh, that is a great question. I would say, even though, again, I was pretty ignorant, I did notice a lot stronger, like conservative beliefs in Southern Utah, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, to my knowledge, I mean, now I know, but at the time, I didn't really think I knew anyone who was a little more liberal or had more liberal ideals. It seemed a lot more similar to me in St. George
Hmm.
than
Yeah.
Salt Lake area.
Hmm. I feel like normally when people get into kind of middle school and high school, they start forming like more specific political beliefs. Do you feel like that
Hmm.
was a similar experience for you, like forming, starting to think more about politics at that time?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think high school was a big deal, just like AP history, AP government type classes. I took like a current events class as well, and just kind of got me thinking again. Like I was still kind of just parroting beliefs I'd heard, but I was like, oh, I guess I never really considered that this other side might also have, I don't know what the word is, might also be relevant and important too. So yeah, I think
Hmm.
it opened my eyes a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. So I wanted to ask, Utah's not a super diverse place in general. Other
Hmm.
than like maybe like Salt Lake City, and then I know we've got some large immigrant communities down in southern Utah, but it's pretty white. And do you feel like your experience living in Utah has been different at all because you are like Asian presenting a little bit?
Hmm. Yeah, I think so for sure. I mean, I remember like as a kid, I didn't really process it or know why I felt this way, but like I just remember I didn't really feel like there were like people that I don't know on TV or in my life that like looked like me, if that makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
Like I would read books and like, okay, it was like about all these white girls or watch movies and again, like blonde white girls. And I remember being jealous of like my blonde friends or things like that. Just that like I knew that I looked different. And so that like I think impacted me for a long time. And yeah, again in St. George, like there were maybe like three Asians in like my graduating class. Like I don't know. Anyways, so I mean, it was something that was I don't know what the quite the word is, but like it made me different, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
oh, like, you know, I'm not full white. Everybody else around me is. So it was kind of fun in that way, but I also felt a little bit othered because like I didn't quite seem that part of me didn't seem to quite fit in with what was all around me.
Hmm. How have you learned, and I'm sure it's an ongoing process for sure, still living in Utah, but how have you learned to kind of navigate those differences and feeling like somewhat othered is how you put it.
Hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah. I think just like honestly talking more openly about it, like my family will talk about it quite a bit now. Like my siblings had similar experiences or are currently having similar experiences, you know. And so that is helpful, I think, just to process my own feelings. And then now, like, as silly as it is, like, oh, I can follow like creators that are Asian and like it can just have a lot more representation in my life. I can read books from authors who, you know, have similar backgrounds to my dad. And anyways, I can just be have a lot more representation in my life than I could as a 10-year-old. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really cool, like talking about it for sure. And obviously I have like no experience with this because I'm a white woman. But I just know like from my siblings' perspectives and then friends, just like talking about it is education is so important. And the more people
Mhm.
know, the more accepting they can be. And so yeah, I think that's really powerful. It's just continuing to talk about it and continuing to take up space and showing that like your culture matters just as much as anyone else's. And yeah, I just think that's really cool,
Mhm.
really powerful. So, shifting a little bit, you graduated high school and then did you go straight into serving an LDS mission or did you go to college for a little bit first?
Great question. I went to 1 year of college before going on an LDS mission. So I came back up to Utah Valley to go to school at Brigham Young University.
Gotcha. And what was that first year
Mhm.
like? I'm sure probably preparing for a mission and getting ready for that next step in your life, but what was that first year
Mhm.
kind of being away from home for the first time and yeah, just the whole college experience?
Yeah. I mean, overall, you know, it was great. And at the time, it was kind of another big life transition, like, oh, have to make a whole new group of friends, have to like break out of my shy shell and like try and figure out what other people I can connect with. And so it was kind of a lonely time as well, where I was like, wow, I'm not the only, you know, I'm there's a lot of other kids out there like me, if not like physically, like socially and educationally and all those things. So um,
Hmm.
it was it was great living away from home though for a little bit just to grow up a little bit.
Hmm. Do you feel like your political beliefs or the way that you saw the world kind of shifted once you moved out for the first time and you started going to college? Usually that's when people are confronted with a lot of different beliefs. And I know BYU is a little more homogenous than probably most universities are, but still
Yeah,
surprisingly like a lot of different political beliefs going on there. So what was that like?
yeah. Homogenous is a really great word for that. Just to start with. I think what kind of started shifting like my personal beliefs was actually kind of after my mission. I finished my LDS mission in 2020. My parents were living in South Carolina at the time. I moved in with my parents. Um, COVID was happening, Black Lives Matters things were happening, Trump was happening. And my parents' political ideals had actually kind of begun to shift with that as well. And so they had a big part, I think, in like seeing them kind of change the way that they viewed the world, kind of made me reflect and also make that change as well. So, not so much like my very first year at school, I was still pretty young and pretty ignorant, but kind of post mission and then more of college after that, if that makes sense, which we'll return
Yeah.
to. But
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I definitely want to dive into that, but I want to start a little bit more experiences on your mission. So, where
mhm.
did you end up going on your mission?
Yeah, so I was assigned to Guatemala. I mostly kind of stayed on the east side, in pretty small towns, pretty rural, and no big cities or anything like that.
Hmm. Was this a huge culture shift to go from Utah to this like very different country, different area? Yeah, what was that like moving from one country to another?
Yeah, it was a huge culture shift. I'd been outside the country for like, 2 weeks at a time, maybe, like, and it was always my family. And so it was big because, as a missionary for the LDS church, you kind of just are kind of sent out. Like, I didn't speak Spanish. I had no idea what to say. I was with like a stranger for, the whole, all day, every day. And so the first few months were very, very hard. Just, I didn't understand anyone. I remember I would just sit in people's houses and like stare at the conversation happening and like just make the same facial expressions as everybody else. It's like trying to figure out what's going on. And a few months in, I specifically remember I was just like sitting at my desk and studying, and I realized I was like, oh my goodness, like I kind of forgot that this church that I'm going to is the same church that like I've been going to my entire life. That for some reason my brain hadn't quite like made the connection that like, oh, like this is a familiar space for me, and even though it's in a different language, like it is meant to be the same, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, yeah,
it
definitely.
was difficult, but yeah.
Yeah. Did you have any specific experiences that shifted how you saw the world at that time? I'm sure there's a lot. But yeah, any that specifically come to mind?
Um, Great question. I I guess something that I hadn't dealt with very much is um a young woman like in Utah was kind of just realizing like, oh, there's this very different world outside of Utah and maybe specifically the United States. Is the and like okay, that women specifically have very different experiences than I'd grown up with. Um, or experiences that I'd had before. This was kind of the first time where like I would walk on the street and like always be catcalled or, have someone shout some really rude comment or whatever about us sexually or have people like try and like hold my hand or touch me like these random strangers. So anyways, I just never ever experienced or heard really of anything like that, and so it was a pretty big eye opener um as a 19-year-old girl to go to a different country and realize like, oh, these different people experience these really sexist things.
Yeah. Gosh, I can't even imagine. And you're only 19 and people are like, I don't know, that's just such a crazy experience. How did you like kind of navigate that?
I don't think I navigated it well. I kind of just like pushed it down and just like accepted it as like, oh, like it's kind of a fact of life. That's
Mm,
what a lot of other like, you know, female missionaries faced every day. And like it could have been a product of like, oh, we were missionaries, like, you know, for a church, and so like people were just trying to rile us up, or like another thing is we were also women, two single women, really young, like pretty defenseless, honestly. Anyways, so I don't think I navigated it very well at the time. I kind of just ignored it and like tried to move on with myself. But I guess since growing up a little bit and like coming back, I've had to kind of deal more with those repressed feelings and frustrations
mhm.
that I didn't as a missionary.
Yeah, yeah. Have you, and not to like talk about it further, just like I'm sure it was kind of like a traumatic, but just did that change kind of how you saw the world, like when you got back to the United States, kind of saw how women were treated maybe similarly or different? I don't know, but just yeah, how did that kind of change your perspective?
Yeah, it definitely changed my perspective. For a while, I was like, didn't really want to associate with men that much. I just had had very negative experiences um, as a missionary. And, you know, not to say that like every man is horrible and treats women in poorly in Guatemala. Like that is not true at all. But the random people were the ones that like really made an impact. Um, and I lost track of what your question was. What what did you say?
No, I think that was good. Just like your perspective when you got home, like how you carried that with you, and you kind of answered it, but yeah, just how you saw the world after that. Yeah.
Yeah, it changed for sure. But
Mhm.
kind of again, talking through it, actually working through it has helped me a lot. So
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I'm sorry that you went through that. It's not okay, and way too many women have similar experiences, and
yeah,
it's really sad. And I think I've heard a lot of LDS women who went on missions have very similar experiences, and I don't know like what it is, but it's really sad and um, definitely something that needs to change in the US and in other countries as well. But yeah, anyways, I'm just sorry that you had to go through that. And I appreciate you being vulnerable and kind of talking through that. Because I'm sure there are some people, maybe even listening, who are going through something similar, and just knowing that they're not alone is so powerful. Um, so yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Um, your survey response, when you were kind of talking about your mission, you also mentioned immigration kind of being something that you experienced a lot while you were in Guatemala. Do you want to talk about that? Did you have any like specific experiences or anything?
um, yeah. I mean, as anyone who knows geography knows, United States, Mexico, and then Guatemala is kind of right down there under there. And so I met a lot of really amazing people who, you know, had maybe lived for a few years in the United States, you know, undocumented and come back of their own choice or been sent back. I had a lot of people who, anyways, were just yeah, very invested in the United States and what was happening presidentially and politically there as well. And so I think that, interestingly enough, like even though I had lived around Latinos for like a long time, and I even had like friends that um, were Latinos and things before I mentioned, like immigration had never been like a topic on my mind for some reason, but being around a lot of people who had experienced how horrible trying to immigrate to the United States was really opened my eyes to uh, the problems that we face and the problems that they face.
Yeah. Did that impact when you got home and you were kind of interacting with these communities? Did that impact how you interacted with them and saw other immigrant communities back in the United States?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I have good friends now who immigrated here or who their families did, or you know, even my dad immigrated, but in a very different way. Um, anyways, it definitely has changed I think my social circle as well. Like something that I'm really grateful for. Like one reason why I'm grateful for my mission is that I feel like speaking another language opens up like a whole, like literally a different world to you. And so I'm really grateful that I can speak Spanish now. Now I can connect with a lot of other people that have different experiences than me, like even now. And so I have a lot of good friends who I wouldn't have known if I hadn't been able to speak Spanish. So, anyways, it's really been a huge blessing.
That's cool. So you mentioned you were out during COVID, right? Was your mission cut short? I know a lot of people were sent home a little bit early. Was yours cut short, or did you get to finish out your full 18 months in Guatemala?
Great question. My husband gets mad at me when I say this. So I'm weird. I extended a week on my mission. I don't know why. It makes no sense now. But extended a week to just basically stayed a week longer than I was supposed to, just because I wanted to. And so then uh that's kind of when like everything started shutting down. So I went home a day early. Um
Gotcha.
so my mission was not really impacted by COVID.
Okay, yeah. Um, I've had a couple other people on the pod talk about how difficult it was to come home to like just a completely different world. Specifically like being out on a mission, you're with someone all the time, you're with the community, you're interacting with different people, and then coming home and you're isolating and you're just with your immediate family or just with the people you're quarantining with. What was that experience like for you coming home and just kind of like a completely different world than when you left?
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I briefly mentioned this before, but my family had since moved from St. George, Utah to um, Charleston, South Carolina. And so I came home to South Carolina, to like a new house, new neighborhood. I didn't really know anyone or have any friends anyways, and there was no really way to make friends. So yeah, it was pretty ostracizing. I spent a ton of time with my family, watched a lot of movies. I would FaceTime friends and things, but it wasn't quite the same. So it was very isolating. I got a job working at a smoothie shop that was, still kind of open. We do like a drive through and um, yeah, very different than what I expected.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. Did you did you enroll back in BYU while you were still in South Carolina, or did you get to go back to campus in person, or were you just mostly online for the rest of your degree?
Oh yeah, great question. So I got home in March of 2020 and then the new semester started in I don't know, September of 2020. And so I did fly back out to Provo where BYU is based to take classes. I honestly don't really I assume most of them were online at that point.
Hmm.
Um, but it was nice to be back kind of with friends and um having roommates and stuff. That part was good.
Yeah. So you studied teaching. You wanted to become an elementary school teacher. Did you always
Hmm.
know that you wanted to study that, or was there kind of a path that led you into wanting to be a teacher?
Yeah, great question. I did not always know that. I have always loved like the arts and things like that, like dancing, drawing, writing, things. But I'm also a person who needs like a lot of stability. I'm very risk averse. And so one thing that I really liked about an education, a degree in education is like a pretty clear career path. I would say um I also, like generally liked kids and being around kids and things like that. And so elementary education kind of just made sense at the time. And yeah, I chose it and here I am.
I love that. Another thing you mentioned in your survey were some specific classes that you took at BYU. Do you want to kind of go into like what your classes were like? I didn't study education, and I'm sure a lot of people just don't know what it's like to study that. And so, yeah, tell us a little bit about what it's like to be an education major.
Yes. So I think my story is kind of strange because usually when people think about BYU, like It's run by our church. It's like it's a very conservative school generally. But there are a few degrees here and there where you get some classes that aren't as conservative. And so one of those classes for me was called multicultural education. And it just dealt a lot with like, hey, when you're a teacher, you're probably going to have kids that are not in the majority, that are not in majority groups, right? So obviously females, um, people of color, LGBTQ kids, stuff like that. And so this class was kind of meant to like really just like kind of open our eyes to a broader world. And so it totally did that for me. We I feel like it was like the first time where like my professor was had us read books by like really diverse authors and like black people talking about their experience being black living in America. Um, like she had us like our very first day of class, she had us introduce ourselves and like tell the class our pronouns. And I was like, I've never done this in a class before. Anyways, it was just really a really great class. Like, and I feel like it was um kind of validating for me as like a, a half Asian woman just to be like, okay, like I'm not alone in like feeling kind of ostracized from this general group. Um, so, anyways, that was a really amazing class that I think changed a lot of or helped to shift my view of the world and how I saw it and different problems that I perceived. Another class that I took that was pretty impactful was, um, I guess, little background. BYU, religious school, also requires you to take religious classes and that have to do with different aspects of the church or the Bible, things like that. And so I took a class called Jesus Christ and the Everlasting Gospel, meant to talk about Jesus. And in that class, I kind of realized that growing up in the church, kind of all the scripture heroes that you hear about are men. Um, whether it's like actually the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or and whatever any other Christian church, I would say. And this is the first time where I sat down and read scriptures and I was like, oh my gosh, like women exist in the scriptures. They're like women in history that made like important, I don't know, that had a big impact on different people. And like I was reading like the New Testament and it was really cool for me to realize that like the first recorded witness of Jesus Christ's resurrection, like he chose to be Mary Magdalene, who's like a woman. Um, so anyways, that was kind of a special I don't know why I didn't make that realization before, but I was like, okay, like women also can have really powerful spiritual experiences and can be leaders spiritually. And that just wasn't something that I'd seen it or heard a ton about. And so that really inspired me. So I'd say
That's so
those are two
cool.
of my most impactful classes there.
I love that so much. And I think, yeah, our brains, because society is mostly built by men for men, I think our brains
Mm-hmm.
just naturally like focus on that. Because I've had to like do the same thing as like I'll read a book or I'll watch a movie or something. And it's just like I do have to like train myself to focus on those female characters, even though like I'm a woman and I know that I have just as powerful an experience as a man does, right? But it's just like I don't know, that's so validating. Like your experience is very valid and I think a lot of people experience that. But I think that's really cool that you're able to focus on those female historical figures and kind of for the first time that must have been like a really exciting experience to have. So
Yeah,
um
yeah. It was really sorry, I think my AirPods just died, so I'm gonna take them out. Over here.
okay, no, you're totally fine. Yeah, so that's actually kind of a really good segue into the next question that I had for you. So I'm interested to hear you were kind of around BYU campus when some of like the LGBTQ demonstrations were happening. There was like the honor code stories and then kind of some beginning pushes of like social change on BYU
Mm-hmm.
campus. So, and I don't know if you were like physically on campus during this time or if it was still kind of virtual due to COVID, but what was it like being on campus during this time where there was a lot going on, a lot of social injustices happening, a lot of people pushing for change?
Yes, it was. a very interesting time. I think it was still mostly virtual for me. So honestly, like a lot of that time, I feel like I was pretty disconnected from life in general, education, everything kind of like that. But so I feel like all of the like pushes for social change kind of felt that way to me as well. Like I felt like kind of removed just because I was removed from everything in life. But that that time at BYU was also pretty formative in like shaping my beliefs and changing them a little bit, just kind of because I remember growing up talking about, like, I don't know, gay people, for example, like, oh, well, there's not that many people that deal with it. And like, it's fine, basically, was kind of the rhetoric that I had been told. And so, um, kind of with so much talk about LGBTQ plus things, it just got me thinking a lot more and kind of just considering that maybe what I'd heard before, or what I've been taught probably, or, was not true. That,
Hmm.
anyways, it just opened my eyes again to a lot of social change that needed to happen. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I know it was kind of a formative time for a lot of people on campus at
mm,
that time. Did that shift how you mentioned LGBTQ specifically, but did that shift kind of how you viewed like the world politically, maybe like your culture around you or the church specifically, or just did that like shift a lot for you?
yeah, for sure. And I honestly can't really quite place when this was, but around this time ish, when I was still in college, I went to a lecture basically given by a BYU professor, a BYU employee, probably, named Ben Shalati. And he's an openly gay white man that is active in the LDS church and kind of just telling like his experience of being a man, being a gay man in the church. And my husband and I went to this lecture, and I just remember I had friends and things that were gay, and of course, I loved them, but I hadn't ever really like sat down and asked them like what their experience was like being in, Utah, being in the church, just being in the world in general. And so this lecture was super impactful. And I just remember him saying like, he's like, whenever I feel alone and I see like a pride flag or a rainbow pin or, anyone wearing like any sort of just support, like, hey, like, I'm glad you're here and like, I'm glad you're alive. He's like, that is what has like lifted me and helped me like continue living, basically. I, I'm probably misquoting this. Sorry, Ben Shalati. But I just remember like after he finished, my husband and I were like on our way home and we were like, like we should go buy ourselves some pride pins and like put them on our backpacks and wear them on BYU campus. And so we did. Like I went on Amazon. I probably should have bought from someone that was actually LGBTQ and supported them. But anyways, we went on Amazon, like bought ourselves pride pins, and like I still have a little rainbow pin on my backpack. And my husband, who also grew up in a very, very conservative family and just general culture, like had his pride flag on, a little pride pin on his backpack, and like people would at BYU would just like make comments like, wow, like, hey, like I love that you're wearing that, like I love your pin, like thanks for being supportive. So it's just, anyways, it just those are very little ways to be allies, but like I just feel like that totally changed my perspective and just helped me see like ways that I had definitely been wrong when in the past.
I think that's so beautiful. I love that you guys got pride pins and just were kind of showing your support in just like a small way, but like it's so impactful just to like to see that and just to know that like you're a safe place and that people can come talk to you and just that you especially, again, we use this word homogenous, but BYU is not the safest place for LGBTQ community. And so just like providing that little symbol of like, hey, I'm okay. Like you could come, you can be friends with me or you can talk to me. Like I just think that is so powerful. So anyways, I love that you did that. That's so cool. So, jumping forward to now, you've graduated and you're officially an elementary school teacher. How has that been? It's been your first year of teaching, right? You just finished up, or has it been your second year? I can't remember.
Yeah, I just finished my first year, about to start my second.
Okay, awesome. How was that?
It was very hard. And people always laugh, like they're like, "Oh, haha." I'm like, "No, like you actually don't know." Like it was really, really hard, and it's just so interesting because like talking to other teachers are like, "Oh yeah, like the first 3 years are hell." I'm like, "Okay, great. Like I love hearing that. Why? Why?" But I mean, I learned a ton. I would say I'm like a way better teacher than I was. It's at the beginning of last year. And I learned a ton of important lessons. Hopefully, I'll be better this year than I was last year. But I am glad I don't have to repeat my first year.
So I wanted to ask because you engage with this next generation, I mean, daily, all the time. So I'm just like very interested, what do you feel like are the biggest challenges this next generation faces? What are some things that they are going through right now that might be a little bit different than what we went through or other generations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, maybe I was just very clueless as a child, but I feel like just everything politically going on is crazy to try and wrap your head around as an adult. And so I think as a child, it's even harder. And like, it's very interesting to see different kids come to school with, like hearing different things at home that, just because families are different and they have different beliefs. And so they'll come to school and do probably what I did and, parrot whatever they hear at home. But anyways, it's just a really tumultuous time. And so I think that impacts them a ton, like mental health wise, like, anxiety, depression, everything. Um, a lot of, yeah, a lot of struggles that I mean, every generation faces, but I think this one does especially.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a completely, I mean, with every new generation, there's going to be challenges and stuff. And yeah, that's got to be a unique experience to be with these kids. And I don't know, just see something different. And yeah, that's got to be so unique. So
Yeah.
yeah, so okay, so shifting gears to more specific political beliefs. Would you say you're more left leaning, or do you find yourself more in the middle of the political spectrum?
I am I would say like generally like yes, like kind of moderate, but just more left leaning, just kind of with a lot of social issues. That's kind of what powers my left leaning, just because I feel like oftentimes those on the left are a little more concerned with social issues than those on the right, depending on what social issue we're talking about. But generally a little bit more left leaning. Yeah.
No, that makes total sense. Definitely like in the middle, but still have some more liberal views. Yeah, when it comes to social issues, which I feel like a lot of people sympathize with as well. That's what kind of draws them more left than maybe more right. But still like right in the middle for you. How do you feel like this specific identification impacts your life, if at all?
Um, I would say again, living in Utah, kind of a homogenous community. Um, I don't, I'm like, I wonder if sometimes it's like a silent, not majority necessarily, but I do think there's more of us than you think. If that makes sense. Like the very loud ones are the very extreme ones. And then most people are like quietly don't agree with the extreme people. Yeah, that's something that uh bothers me sometimes is when like just only extreme voices get heard. So
Yeah, yeah,
normal people
definitely.
exist too.
Yes. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
think a lot of people are sympathetic to that as well. And I mentioned this on the podcast before, and I've been meaning to fact check it. But when I was studying politics at BYU, we learned about like the percentage of people that fall, like where they fall on the political spectrum. and it was like upwards of 80% fine, like feel like they're somewhere in the middle. And then there's this like 10% that's super Republican and 10% that's super Democrat. But I feel like you're right.
Hmm.
I think it is like a silent majority of people who, yes, Utah is a very Republican state, but I think people might be like more central like you, but just leaning slightly more to the right. But they probably still
Hmm.
have like a lot of similar beliefs and stuff. And because I know a lot of Republicans who, I mean, they're claimed Republicans, right? Because they live in Utah and it's easier to vote as a Republican. There's a lot of incentives to be a
Yeah.
Republican in Utah. But they also really care about those social issues that you were talking about. And so that kind of pulls them more to the middle. So, anyways, all this to say, I think there's definitely a lot of people who agree with you and who would say
Hmm.
very similar beliefs to you. Um, so because of this like specific identity and all the lived experiences that we've talked about today, what do you feel like you are the most passionate about politically?
I talked to my husband about this and I was like, there's such a long list. But just okay. Just to like throw things out like immigration, um, institutional racism, sexism, ableism, anything needs to be gone. um, like women's rights, I like just education in general, like valuing education. That's really important to me. Extreme, this is, I don't know, this is like political issue, but well, no, it kind of is. Extreme views. Um, I
Yeah.
just think people and misinformation really bothers me. So, yeah, those are a few.
No, I love that. Most people have like such a long list, and so yeah, definitely. I love those. So, shifting into just some final thoughts, what do you hope that people take away from this interview?
Great question. I feel like I've been all over the place, but a few I think things that kind of just stick out from my life experiences is we kind of mentioned this in the beginning, but I just think representation is really important. Like everyone should see themselves in places of power and or just see themselves somewhere, whether books, media, um, whatever, represent leadership. I just think that is really important. Um, uh, I think just being careful in expressing uh, extreme views and just try to listen to people with different experiences than you. I think that's something that I kind of learned like in my formative college years is like realizing that just because my experience is one way doesn't mean that someone can't have a very different experience with the same thing that I have, and like that is life and that's okay. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, be nice to people. Listen to them.
Amen.
The end.
Yes, yeah. Nope, that's the end. That's all we needed to say, right?
Yeah.
No. Um, so that perfectly ties into my next question, which is what do you wish that people better understood about you and then others who see the world similarly to you?
Yeah. I'm not super vocal generally with in public or with most people about a lot of my personal beliefs. Not because I don't like believe in them strongly, but just because in the climate that we're in, I don't feel super comfortable expressing them to people who I know will not agree with me. Um, and so I think just being willing to listen, like you, Kate, thank you. Being willing to listen and consider other people's experiences can do a world of good. We were I was just talking with some friends, and someone said something along the lines of like, "We don't have to think alike, but like, let's try and think together." And so I think just building bridges of understanding is really important right now.
That was perfectly put. I love that quote. Any parting thoughts from you before we wrap up? Any last minute things you wanted to mention?
Um, I don't think so. Just yeah, nope.
No, that's great. That's totally fine. I did just want to, real quick, before we close, Naomi is writing a book. And it's kind of in the early stages, but I did just want to give you a second if you want to kind of give a little plug to it, let everyone know what you've been working on because I think it's so cool. And I think other people will think it's really cool. But yeah, do you want to tell us a little bit about the book that you're writing?
Thank you, Kate. Yes, I'd love to. A fun fact about me is that I am pretty obsessed with Jane Austen, reading Sierra stuff, clean romance that has been like my genre for the past 10 years. And so I decided to try to attempt to write my own. And again, like something that I feel pretty passionately about is representation. And so as I was like doing my research and things, I just read a lot of not a lot, and one article that was talking about like, oh, like Jane Austen adaptations need more representation, and like just trying to think outside the box of like, well, what would life look like if you were a Black person living in, high society at that time? And so I decided to write a book about someone like me, what someone like me's life might have been if they lived in the early 1800s in England. So I'm exploring that right now. We'll see where it goes.
Awesome. I think that's so cool. I'm so excited. Yeah, if you end up publishing it, I'll be the first one to buy. But yeah, just wanted to give that little plug for you, just to talk about because yeah, you seem super excited about it. And I'm pumped about it. I know all our friends are really excited. So yeah,
Thank
anyways, well, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story. Thanks for being vulnerable about a few things and yeah, just being this amazing light of a person that you are. So thank you so much, Naomi.
Yeah, thanks, Kate.